Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I am your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I'm really excited to have a special guest on. And my guest is Tawana Kenney, and she goes by TK, and that's how we'll refer to her during the podcast. And she is the founder and principal auctioneer of a wonderful auction house called Astounding Auctions. And TK was the auctioneer for the 2024 Dell Children's Ball Up, and it raised seven figures, and it was really one of the most magnificent auctions that I've ever seen. And they did it entirely with one method. They only did it through a fund to need. And I've gotten lots of inquiries and requests to talk a little bit more about fund to needs and how they're different from live auctions. So I couldn't think of anybody better as a guest than TK to do that. So with that, TK, welcome, and we're so excited to have you on as a guest today.
Thank you, Rob and friends. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we get into the auction part, talk a little bit about what the mission of the Dell Children's Foundation is.
Well, the Dell Children's Foundation, their mission really is to ensure that children receive top-notch, state-of-the-art healthcare, regardless of cost. And due to that, they depend largely on donors to make sure that they are able to help everyone, regardless of their financial situation.
That's fantastic. And, it really is a community hospital. And it just amazes me how many tentacles of the community I see there, either when I'm, near Mueller and I have to go by there, or, just stories that I hear, whether it's at the gala or other places for that. So thanks for sharing that. And I'm always curious how people get involved with organizations, because there is no one pat story for that. So talk a little bit about how you initially became involved with the Dell Children's Foundation.
Well, I was fortunate enough to run into Susan Hewlett, their executive director, at a different event. And when she initially told me about what she did, I was like, "Oh, okay, of course, sounds good. I'd love to work with you. However, we'll see what happens." Well, it turns out that she did reach out. And the night before I spoke with the Dell team, I happened to see their head of events and fundraising, Armando, at another event. And he was like, "Well, you're hired already. I just want to know everything we need to do to be successful and to talk more about what happened." And it was a very natural progression to working with them. And I had a story with them because they actually saved my nephew's life when we had no idea what was happening and we kept going to doctors and it turned out that his appendix had ruptured. And so they are near and dear to my heart for what they do. They rushed him into emergency surgery after getting him on antibiotics to get him out of being in a septic state. And so we love and adore the work of Dell Children's Hospital.
Wow, that's a really powerful, and I did not know that. So that's a really powerful personal story. And that, it's interesting because there's really two things that I drew from what you said. One is, you know, people speak with the most passion, and TK, you really spoke with passion there when it personally impacts and affects you, your family, and your own life. But the other thing is that I appreciate that you ran into two different people who are executives within the same organization at two different events, because so much of life, and that's one of the reasons why I love chronicling galas and signature fundraising events, so much of life is showing up and you showing up for things, and both Susan and Armando seeing you at multiple things over the years, as I have. Part of it is that helps build trust and camaraderie with top organizations. So just because you're there representing one organization doesn't mean, and that's a thing with nonprofits, it's a myth. They will go and support other nonprofit organizations throughout the community. And for them to see you
Mhm.
on a stage and really being dynamic with the audience, it allows it allows your business to grow and expand. And, with that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your path to become an auctioneer, because you really do have a unique and interesting background. So I definitely want you to share a little bit more about that.
Yes. Well, as a little girl, my number one dream was to be able to help heal the world because I lived in Germany when the Berlin Wall came down. And I didn't really understand what it meant. And so I, of course, went digging to understand what happened, discovered the infamous Anne Frank, and realized how much the world just needed love. And I grew up with that on my heart. Unfortunately, I grew up and went into banking and joined the military and was called to active duty after September 11th and decided I wanted to be a chef. Um, some of that does give back to the world, but luckily, while I was in banking, I went to Leadership Austin, and one of my classmates and we were goofing off during our talent show in our last essential class, 2013, best class ever. We were goofing off for the talent show, and they said, "What's your talent?" And I said, "I think I'll pretend to be an auctioneer because I talk fast." And they said, "That's a good idea." So I go and Google what do auctioneers say, and I'm selling items, and we end up having an impromptu fundraiser for everyone else in my class who did not have talents. We raised money for Leadership Austin, and they said that you should come do this for the organization that I'm on the board of. And I said, I absolutely should not. I am a boring banker and no one wants to see me on any stage. Well, about a year later, they finally twisted my arm. And in 2014, I said yes. I cried before I got on stage because I realized there were real people there. And I was like, you're not going to raise any money. Women are never going to get out of their bad situations, all because I'm going to flop. Um, in Adverse, we raised 500% to their goal. And we factually did help women get out of situations. And I was hooked, and I felt like the little girl in me was living her wildest dream, and I wanted more. And I went to auction school a few months later, and I stayed in corporate America until 2018. And then in 2019, I started doing this full time, and I have not looked back since.
Wow. So that is such a cool story. Now, I've got like 85 questions, but we'll limit it to, to one or two here. So one is, what got you initially back in 2013 and 2014? What got you from no to yes? What made you decide, okay, I'm going to actually say yes because these people keep coming back to me and just allow this opportunity to come in? What was the shift within you to make you say yes?
Well, Rob, I'm going to give you two answers. The first answer is the truth. They were just relentless and would not let up. Okay. It was just, oh my goodness. And that's the truth. The other truth of it is that it sounded like something that I could do. It just terrified me to all get out because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I'm okay with not knowing what I don't know. So, with them being relentless and me being okay being uncomfortable, we just put those two things together and did it.
That's fantastic. So basically they pushed you out of your comfort zone and something within you was like, okay, the relentlessness. It was almost kind of like, a child asking for candy. It's like, okay, fine, just do it. Okay, we'll do it once. And I just love that, you've turned it into a passion. And the other thing is that it seems like you have always had this essence of wanting to help others. And it's just, I loved hearing that story because the career found you,
Yes,
you
exactly.
know, so talk a little bit about, with that, I want to, kind of gear into you and Astounding Auctions and your team. So what made you decide to make the pivot that, okay, I'm going to leave banking now. I'm going to open up, Astounding Auctions and my own auction, your own auction house. So talk a little bit about Astounding Auctions, what made you decide to make that jump.
Well, I'll take this back to my Leadership Austin class again. My class had approximately, of the 60 of us, there were about 13 attorneys. After I did that one event, many of my other classmates said, come do ours, come do ours. And I said yes, and I would. Well, they essentially gifted me my business. They said, we'll help you with your contract. We'll do this. My classmates put my business together, the attorneys on that side, and helped me do this. And it was complete serendipity. If there is not a moment that's saying this is for you, I don't know what is. And then the realization that I had never seen another auctioneer. So the night before that very first one, I went to go see someone and I realized that is what I said I wanted to do. I want to help people. And even though I'll never meet the people that I'm helping, I still get to do it. Even though I may never see it up front, if I do the research on the organizations, make sure they're doing the work well, I am truly helping people. And that's so powerful. And I do that. I look up my organizations before I say yes. I make sure they're doing the work. I make sure they're being equitable in their giving. I ensure that they have a good ratio to what they're paying their team, to what's actually being invested in their programs. I had to. I had no choice. It, like you said, Rob, it found me. And the little girl in me is excited every day that we hit the stage.
That's fantastic. Now, and you started, with yourself, but your team is actually much larger now. So talk a little bit about you and your team and kind of how, your team is able to cover, because I know that you really go to galas all over the country and do auctions all over the country. So talk a little bit about you and your team at Astounding Auctions.
Yes. So in the auction industry, when I entered, I noticed that there was this image of what an auctioneer was. And so I went out looking for people who were different. I wanted to find people of color. I wanted to find women. I wanted to find people who are LGBTQIA plus. I wanted to find people because I think it's important to establish trust and rapport on the stage with your donors in a way that makes sense. If you tell me that you are here to support the LGBTQIA plus community who's never saying the words of gay or lesbian because they're afraid to let those words cross their lips, how much trust are you developing? So I intentionally wanted to put a team out there who was okay, who was more than okay. It was part of their personal ethos. So I now have auctioneers on my team who believe in supporting causes that are close to them. So we can, because that is my brand. We want to speak of you as if we are a co-founder. We want people to think that we work for your organization because we speak to the heart so much that people want to give. And I found a group of auctioneers who are able to do just that. And I coach auctioneers. I bring up auctioneers when I meet them. And sometimes I may just meet a random person on the street and I'm like, this is for you. We have a team of people who are passionate, who are excited. They keep high energy. Some of them are cowboys because, hey, not all cowboys are the same, but they are everything. I believe in diversity. We are age diverse. We are racially diverse, gender diverse, orientation diverse, education diverse. I believe diversity is important. And we just rock it out and come together and prepare to be your biggest advocate on event night.
Very, very well said. And I love how you talked about the diversity, because the thing is that, the biggest myth about the best galas is that it's a bunch of really rich people who are in fancy clothes. And the best events I've ever gone to are a tapestry. I always, and I've said this on this show before, you have to have all these different dimensions and elements to give give an event layers, to give an event a soul. That's probably the best word for it. And that only happens when you have a broad range of people. And I really admire you in your practice that you bring those various elements of the tapestry and you incorporate it in your own business. And I think it really shines really strongly, with every event that I've ever seen you do. So I want to applaud you for that. I think that's amazing.
Thank you, Rob.
Absolutely. So, you had mentioned something earlier in your answer, and you were talking about how you research organizations to make sure that they're a good fit for you and what you're looking to do. So, talk a little bit about what some of the big keys are in establishing good relationships with nonprofit organizations. Because, here's the thing, auctioneers are people, they're not miracle workers. So there has to be kind of a good two-legged stool, but there has to be a good foundation with the nonprofit so that the auctioneer can really soar and really help organizations really achieve beyond their wildest dreams in fundraising.
You're spot on. And thank you for acknowledging as much as we'd love to be magicians, we are not. So I'm going to work backwards on that question.
Absolutely.
So the first thing to keep in mind is that we can only do what your audience allows us to do. And you're the one who brings the audience. And so make sure that you bring people with capacity. I'm okay if you have people with capacity who need some convincing because I'm an inspirational person. We're going to inspire them. That's my job. But they have to have capacity. We can't hope they do. But once you know they have capacity, make sure that your auctioneer is getting into the heart of what you do. One of the things that we do is called an Aspire to Inspire meeting. And we may do up to four of these. And I like to do them with board members, the programs team, people who've received benefit from your services, but someone or someone's who can speak highly about what you do. Let's say that you're a program that has musicians that goes in. I want to speak to the musicians who are seeing firsthand the work. I want to speak to plethora of people. These are 20-minute calls. We do a quick 1 minute introduction of why we're doing the call. And then I just ask them open-ended questions and let them pour their heart to me and their joy to me. And I take all of that information and it turns into the story that's going to be told on the stage. Because I don't care about five backpacks. No one cares that they're buying five backpacks. If that's the case, we'd all just come and show up with five backpacks. But what we do care about is giving a child something that can be a conduit to bringing home their hopes and dreams, to having a backpack that's filled with their future opportunities, the delight and joy when they see the thing that says, that's what I want to be when I grow up, the thing that makes them feel confident and prepared when they walk into a classroom. And that's what you're giving them, not five backpacks.
I really love that answer because it's less about the service and or the gift that one receives. It's about the story behind it. And that you articulated that really perfectly, that it's about the organizations pouring their hearts and their souls to you so that you better understand what it is that you're going to be doing in the auction. Do you find that there's a particular thing that certain nonprofits share with you that allows yourself or any auctioneer to do their jobs more effectively and better? What are some things that, really that they share about the organizations or themselves that help help the auctioneer and help the auction be more successful?
You know, Rob, there's not a thing that I'll say that they share, but I will say this. I do have organizations that almost resist meeting. I have organizations that are like, oh, we're only doing a paddle raise, and so we only need to do this, or we only need to do that. Or they want to talk a lot about their floor plan, their layouts, but they don't want to storyboard. And I guess that's the answer then. The answer is storyboarding. Give us a story. What do you want your guests to feel? What do you want them to do based on those feelings? And then how do you know that they're successful? And those are my three questions. And it's not about the fundraising and success, because of course, the goal is to raise as much money as possible. But there has to be another metric. Is the metric that they're coming in and wanting to take tours? Is the metric in that they are bringing a friend? Is the metric that they're sharing your information on social media so that way you get more awareness out there? But what is the actual action that you want to come from this? And we're going to create a story that makes sure we hit on all three of those pillars. And this story needs to be concise, and everyone who touches the stage has to have a part to that. And if it doesn't, I'm sorry, no, you can't come up and speak right now, because we want to be concise and honor time. Because even at gala, honoring times is important.
Absolutely. And it was interesting when you mentioned the pillars. There's one thing in this part of the conversation that's come through. An organization has to be all in. They have to want to meet with and I can tell based on what you're saying, that's part of your vetting process is this organization all in that they really want to, really want to soar. And, you had talked about, oh, I don't need to chat with you because we're only doing a paddle raise or a fund to need. So, and we're actually here to talk about that today. So I thought that that'd be the perfect segue into this conversation. So for those that may be newer to the philanthropy scene, or, because they're a fairly recent phenomenon, they weren't really common 15 years ago. Talk a little bit about what a fund to need, and it also can be called a paddle raise, is.
Yes. So the moment of philanthropy, that's the best way to describe it. The auction and hiring an auctioneer, any friends, almost anyone can get up there and sell something, but not everyone can deliver a paddle raise, a fund to need, a special appeal, because it does have to be delivered. It's the moment where you get your audience excited about the why. There's nothing they're getting in return other than the fact of satisfaction that they helped someone, that they are increasing your ability to do your work. That is the number one purpose of the Fund a Need, to be philanthropic, where everyone gets to become a philanthropist. In an auction, you only have so many winners, but in your moment of appeal, anyone can become a philanthropist. And that's the part that makes it inclusive and exciting.
That is the perfect answer. And I didn't even think about it that it's the one moment in a gala or in a signature fundraising event where everyone gets to be a philanthropist for a moment in time. Whether they're giving $50 or $50,000. It doesn't really matter. Everyone gets to give and they get to share. And I want to kind of turn the next question. This kind of goes back on what we were talking about how you partner with the organizations. Talk a little bit about the importance of making sure that their major donor, like a nonprofit has their major donors lined up for that very top tier of the fund in need to help drive momentum for the rest of the auction, because it's almost like a snowball effect when that top tier is done effectively. So can you share a little bit about the importance of that?
Absolutely. Such a good question. And I love that you said that the work is done already. These are not plants. These are people who are factually giving. We just know that they're giving. It's important because momentum is everything in the Fund a Need. If imagine asking someone to give $1,000 and no one raises their paddle, asking for $750 and no one raises their paddle. Then at 500, you get one person. Sometimes people just need permission to give, or sometimes people just need proof of concept that everything that you said is true and this is worthy of investing in. And think about the larger numbers you start. When you start at 100,000 or you start at 50,000, people want to know that this is a safe investment for me, because at those levels, those are investments. And heck, even at $100, that's an investment for some. Knowing that you have another person in the room, another 20 people in the room is important. People are looking sometimes, if this is inaugural for you, they're looking to see that the people who invited me give are the people who have stood up on the stage giving. Because if they're not, stop signs, red flags, why should I? It's so important that you start off with momentum of actual gifts and not plants, and that you start off with someone who knows. And those conversations can be so simple as, Rob, you've been a supporter of Astounding for quite some time. And we want to honor you and thank you with that and ask you to be our lead donor of the night. Is there a number that feels good to you for the evening that we can commit you to ensure that you're leading the charge for everyone? That feels good. Rob, you're
Yes.
going to be a rock star. You're going to lead the night. You're going to be the first person. And don't be afraid to say that, because it is about your donors. At your gala, it's not about you. Friends, boo boo, honey, it is not about you. It is about your donors. They are the most important people. Everything that has happened because of them. Yes, they didn't get in there and do the surgery. No, they didn't get out there and actually prepare meals, but they gave you the funds to do so. The better you make your donor feel, why wouldn't Rob want to be the person who creates the energy of the night, who gets everyone going, and he creates a celebration of our record-breaking fundraising?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you talked about that and the importance of going to people in advance. And that was a perfect explanation of that, because I have seen organizations in the past where they'll put a number out and no one raises their paddle. And it's like, yes, everyone wants to do their best, and yes, everyone wants to raise more, but you've got to make sure, because if you've got that person setting the tone, you will raise a lot more money than swinging for the fences on the chance that you'll hit a home run. And I really like how you explain that, and that you can make it personal for somebody to set the whole tone for the auction and for that part of the evening.
Absolutely.
That was fantastic. So one auction or one fund in need, because this, that was recently done, was that I said at the top of the show, was a fund in need for the Dell Children's Foundation's recent gala titled Up. And it raised seven figures strictly with a fund in need. So talk a little bit about how you worked with the Dell Children's Foundation team to raise, because that's an incredibly high amount of money to raise in a room of about 400 to 450 people.
Yes, it was Robin. I was afraid, I will be 100% honest, because they took their audience count down from the year before. And I was just like, my gosh, but we're going to do it. We are going to do this. So the Aspire to Inspire meetings. And thankfully, there are quite a few organizations I've had the pleasure of working with that have crossover with Dell Children's. So I've had the opportunity to learn even more about what they do. I also, over the last 2 years, have had quite a medical crisis in my family. And so I've understood the importance of quality healthcare, of people who care and invest, and also understanding the role of being on both sides of this. So, with those things combined, it allowed me to speak to them in a way that, I will be 100% honest, on stage that night, because of what I had recently been through, I didn't know if I was doing a good job
Oh,
because it was still kind of fresh for me.
yeah.
And I spoke from the heart, and I was up there in my head. I wish I had a thought bubble sometimes. Am I talking too much? Is it landing? Am I, is this even making sense? Who decided public speaking was a good idea? Like these are all the things going on in my head. But I did have the comfort of knowing that intrinsically, forward and backwards, I could tell you why Dell Children's Hospital Foundation matters.
That's a great, that's a great answer. And, it, when you speak from the heart, people sense that, and they can tell when it's, I don't want to say a show, but they can really tell when it's personal, but what versus when it's deeply personal. And with you, you can tell it was deeply, you could very easily tell it was deeply personal. And that, inspires others, much like, the initial person that sets the tone for, the giving for the entire evening. So I just think that's, was a fantastic answer. And, one of the other unique components, and I love to hear a little bit more about this as part of your overall auction strategy. Um, I know that it included a substantial match. So basically, if someone gave $1 during the funding need, it was really giving two up to a certain amount. Talk about how the donor match affected your strategy at that overall funding need at the Dell Children's Gala.
Oh, absolutely. So, one, we love our donors who are so generous as to match funds, but it also gives that assurance in humankind. We all like a little competition. So if there's a match of $500,000, $1 million, don't we all want to be a part of hitting that? It's once again that moment of, you can do something you may not have ever thought was possible. If your most is 250 tonight, guess what? You just turned into a magician and turned that into $500. And if your maximum is 100,000, well, guess what? I hope you're feeling wealthy tonight because it just turned into 200. Everyone's capacity increases, and that feels good. So we know that we're going to do 1 million and make people feel good about it. I can't stand those moments where it's forgotten who has gotten us to this point, that we're doing this in a room and we're forgetting to let our donors be donors, that we're forgetting to let them, this is a celebration party for them. It truly is. It's to highlight what we've done because of everyone wants to invest in a winner.
Mm.
So let's let them know we're still winning. And you too get to be a winner with this match as well and win more than you thought that you could. So keep pouring that into them. And when you have those donors, sometimes it may be a matter of, let's say, Rob, you're not able to attend this year. And Rob, you have friends who you typically bring. Well, we'd still love you to give a gift. Could we honor you throughout the night by doubling everyone's gift? So you're going to help everyone's dollar stretch that much further. What's that number that feels good to you, Rob?
That's a great answer. $1 jillion. That's going to be my answer for this. So to Ching. But
Yes.
I love that because I've seen so many galas over the years where the top donor isn't there and then they raise 25% less because they're not. And just just because the major donor is not in the room doesn't mean that they can't give. And I love how you take that they're not there. It's an opportunity because there can be other new donors that come into the space and people don't, and it makes the organization, they can focus more on getting the new donors because they've already gotten that major gift from the other donor. So it's a much less stressful position for the nonprofit to be in. So I really like how you laid that out. And I have I want to kind of pivot a little bit, not from Fund a Need, but I want to talk a little bit about Dell Children's only did a Fund a Need. So there was no live auction. Talk about the instances when a nonprofit should look at doing just a Fund a Need versus an auction and a Fund a Need, which a lot of organizations do now.
So I have a few thoughts there, and I I have not done this yet, but I have to give a big kudos to the team at Dell Children. Mary Elizabeth, Armando, Megan. I mean, they have such passionate fundraising and events professionals that they're going to have success. I honestly feel like they are the secret sauce at Dell Children's, and I just get to be another conduit to them. But sometimes I feel like when your mission it can be strong, you have to take away all the frills. And I feel like a live auction can be frills. It can sometimes detract from what you really want to say. And that's something they unlocked on their own. They recognize that this auction takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, but we feel like our guests want to give and they believe in what we do. I think sometimes organizations can be so intricate in what they do. They can have programs here, programs there, programs everywhere. And sometimes you just need to take a step back and refocus, which I have pulled a few organizations into doing this. Do we want this to be about your storytelling or stuff? Because your auction's about stuff. But the first key to that is making sure you have a strong partner for your paddle raise. If you have a strong partner for your paddle raise, if you can get a concise story and honor time so people don't feel talked at, but like they've been taking on a journey similar to a movie, go that route. Because the auction, think about how many committee members you need to procure stuff, to put the stuff together. It makes your programs longer, which end up costing more money. It makes you have more collateral for your PowerPoints. But we're really here just to raise money. And if you have an audience that says, hey, when you start hitting about apples to apples in your auction and Fund a Need, it may be time to let that auction go or even just take it down. I have some groups that only do 3 items in their live auction because they're 3 solid items that they have donors who want to give them. They're excited about giving them. And it's easy work. They don't have to go out and do anything. So we do those 3 items, or we do one super significant item to the organization and then go into the Fund a Need. But if you have a captive audience and you are a nonprofit, you should 100% of the time do a Fund a Need paddle raise or special appeal because you have a captive group to tell your story to.
I love that. And, it was funny when you were talking about kind of taking the outer view, I kind of thought of a drone because, or nonprofits can get into the weeds. And yes, it may be a beautiful lawn, but you want to see the whole house. And that's kind of, what you were describing when you said that. I was like, okay, I really got the visual imagery of that. So I really appreciate you kind of talking about it is big picture. And I love that, you're not necessarily saying, don't do a live auction, do what with a Fund a Need, do what works best for you and your organization and just weigh, when you should be going more all in with a Fund a Need versus an auction. So I really appreciated, really appreciated those answers. And I know we're coming short on time today, but I'd love to end with one question, and that is, what is one thing that all successful Fund a Needs have in common?
All successful Fund a Needs have a strong story, not a reason, but a story that can weave throughout and tell your audience who you are.
That is a mic drop answer. Oh my God. I mean, it's a story, it's a through line, and you really just you gave us just the most wonderful, education on what it takes to do a successful fund to need. And it's a conversation that people have been asking me to do for a long time. So I can't think of anyone better to have done this. So TK, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure being here. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you're welcome back anytime. And for more information about TK and Astounding Auctions, please visit astoundingauctions.com. And for more information about Dell Children's Foundation, please visit supportdellchildrens.org. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.